Association here on the campus of Western Illinois University. And I'll keep it short and sweet. At this time, I would like to call Brother Frederick Douglas Dixon up here. If you all can give him a round of applause and welcome him as he comes up.
Good evening, good people. How you all? So far, so good? This is going to be painless, you all. Y'all got it? We're going to get it started, and get it going. That's all right? All right, so I have to be very steadfast in the idea of saying an ancient African greeting that goes hotep. Hotep means to come and go in peace. So when I say hotep, you say hotep. 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 And when we understand each other, we use a word or a coin phrase that's called ashe. That means I understand. So when I say hotep, that means come and go in peace. So I say hotep, you say hotep, I say ashe, you say ashe. And to here, we begin to work with our young men. So if I'm not mistaken, it's tied into the topic tonight about where young men have gone in college or higher education. Well, let's just put it in a society frame of reference. Where has a black man gone in society? Can we leave it there, you want? Because we know for a fact, those of us who are in college, we are privileged to be here, right? And if you don't know that you're privileged to be here, somebody else is thinking highly of you that have sent for you to be here. So you are on the shoulder of someone, even if you ignore it. But make sure that you understand you're sent for a reason. So when it comes to a young man that I met here during my time as well, and I was so very impressed with him and his peers. And the young man who was the president spoke first, but I like to go to the Angelo Hotel. That young man and his group, you guys did an excellent job with the Black Student Summit. So please, I was when you meet common cool with the pressure on it. And times and dates were met consistently. And I go to a lot of different places, you all. And the young man was up and running the week before. That's rare, young man. I just left Fisk University. I left them Monday. They sent the ticket Sunday night. Y'all understand? So some of our people, no matter where we go to be professional, there's a huge difference between time and time management. Anybody understand what we mean by that? For you college students, the brothers just start laughing. But I'm just explaining this to you. For college students, time and time management can be your make it or your break it. So if you come from a household that y'all always late, and it's okay, you don't want to raise your hand right now. But if you come from a household where it's okay to be late, then those behaviors have to be retaught. But if you come from a household where you were held on time to be accountable on time, and maybe you're helping somebody right now, helping them get through that idea of time and time management. Nothing you can do about time, you all. Time management is something that you can handle. So as college students, it becomes important right now. If you steady late for that same class, somewhere along the line, pay attention to what you're doing during that time, and I guarantee you, you'll find something that you can cut out. Wake up in the morning, turn the TV on. Wake up in the morning, you start texting, Facebook, right? So we have to understand there's a difference between time and time management. And to the entire staff and the administration here at Western Illinois University who has understood the importance of us coming out to be able to speak with you and talk to you all about some very important issues. And more specifically, I really want to pay attention to the student population. You guys very much give a old guy hope about the future. Maybe you want to come back and see it. Maybe you want to get down to right now where we are so we can get straight to the point. So, what is the importance of Black history? And here's a bigger question, Mom. What is the importance in education? More specifically, what is Black History Month and does it need a name? If somebody could give me one name that we consistently talk about and can't get around for Black History Month, what name? Can we say it all together? Martin Luther King. Now, the greatness of Dr. Martin Luther King is in itself evident. The contradictory methods that he used, how he came up with the idea of nonviolence, and he got into another nonviolent tactic and used it on the violent group. But Black History Month was started by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Let me stop right there. Anybody familiar with Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Anybody familiar with Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and lots of times the first things that we hear is, well, why did he pick the shortest one? Has anybody ever heard that? Come on, y'all, talk back to me now. It's all right, right? Because I didn't come and stand and be stiff in front of you guys and not get to hell. Tell the truth. Why did he pick the shortest one for the year? And the cold. Especially if you live up this way, right? Well, let's clear up some of those myths. A myth about Dr. Carter G. Woodson picking February to be the shortest month has everything to do with those he was trying to get to see the accurate accomplishments of blacks. So the idea was to inject into the fabric of history in America the idea of what blacks had accurately accomplished in between Lincoln's and President Washington's birthday. Let me go slow. So he wanted to inject the idea of what blacks had already done, while white America was celebrating Washington and Lincoln. Everybody all right with that? Also, he used February because he was a fan and one who enjoyed the idea of Frederick Douglass. Well, Frederick Douglass, supposedly born on February 14, 1818. One thing that the slave never knew was his birthday. That would time way back too much to his past. What Frederick Douglass had at times thought he was born in 1817. He also thought he was born in 1819. But in about 1894, Frederick Douglass' life spans from 1818 to 1895. In 1894, he's around a group of young men who he's mentoring, and they're doing research, and they paid enough money to figure out exactly when he was born, 1818. February 14th was only chosen because it was chosen by his grandmother, and his grandmother said the significance of February 14th. Anybody know the significance of February 14th? What is it? It's Valentine's Day. Frederick Douglass' grandmother said that was her sweetheart. So they picked February 14th. But let me explain this to you. The idea of what Dr. Carter G. Woodson was doing in the thought of creating Negro History Week. For 1 week, we would celebrate the accurate accomplishments of blacks. This blooms into Black History Month, 1976. So for that period, we always used to just Negro History Week. But what does it mean? And do we need an overhaul of Black history? Does anybody believe that Black History Month is in itself important? And what do you find the importance of? Well, let's make sure that we understand what Dr. Carter G. Woodson wanted to do. He wanted to make sure that the world had an idea that this group had accomplished way more than they were given credit for. And they were living in a society and were a group amongst another group or society within a society. And they were isolated. So that means that if you can actually forward the accurate accomplishments of what blacks have already done by 1926, and we know by 1926, also many things have been created by blacks. So his idea was to make sure that that was going on the record, if you will. That was going to be available for you all to make sure that you could understand. So when I came tonight, you all, I came to bring good news. Now, good news for one can be bad news for another. Because there's not one of us in this particular room that's more important than the truth. Everybody with me so far? Y'all can talk back to me. Y'all all right? Look up. Y'all all right? I told you it's going to be painless. This will be all right. So I want to make sure that we understand there's a saying that comes from the good book. And the good book reads, it says, too much is given, much is required. All of you all who sit here right now are standing on the shoulders of someone else. Somebody made sure that you were here. Somebody was going to make sure that somehow, some way, this little particular person that they thought was so very special would get a chance to not only reach their potential, to understand their potential, but to make a way for somebody else. There's a point in time. I want you all to always remember this when we begin to talk about potential. Potential delayed is potential denied. So not only will your potential be counted without you acting upon it. So let me go slowly again. Potential delayed is potential denied. There you go. There you go. So the idea of you having potential won't last long unless you're acting upon it. So you here at Western Illinois University are definitely acting on your potential, but are you acting on it to your fullest? These are the questions that you begin to ask yourself as a critical thinker. And when we begin to understand the idea of what critical thinking is, let's tie critical thinking into education. And when we begin to talk about education, we need to, because I'm very serious about the idea of giving functional definitions, things that work right now, right here and now. So the idea of what education is, and this is Webster's 9th Collegiate Dictionary, says it's an act or a process. So when we talk about educating a person, we talk about an act or a process. And then it also says it's the idea of instruction. And it says the science of teaching. Some of you all will definitely be teachers. It's a science to teach. First of all, you have to be learned enough to understand that you don't know everything. Everybody does. When you find your teachers that know everything, those teachers at that particular time probably are looking to you as that you're smarter than they are. Potentially. So when we understand the idea of what science really is, science comes from the root word see, which means to know. So when we talk about someone that's learned, then we should know some very important things about science. Science in itself means that absolutely, if we do it time and time again, we get the exact same answer. So it's 196,940,000 square miles on this earth. Correct? 196,940,000 square miles on this earth. Scientific. The circumference of the earth, 24,896 miles. The diameter, 7,926 miles. Between the sun and the earth, 93 million miles, rotates 1,037 and 1/3 degrees per hour, and you never feel it. That's scientific. What I mean by that is, for the square miles of the earth, 196,940,000 square miles. When we talk about science, we need to really know. So when we go to history, what role has science played in history? And what role has historically the idea of what the black man and woman has accomplished? Why is it right now to this particular point we can only say Dr. King when we talk about black history? How about this, you all? When we continue to go, that same dictionary says to educate a person is to impart knowledge, information, to develop them mentally and morally by instruction. Well, morally, when we think about our American society, we can question the morality of the things that we watch on TV. We can question the morality of what we know to be the stalwarts of our whole conventional life's wisdom. Our life's wisdom as black folks came from elders. So now there's a disconnect between the elders and the youth. And that comes from what? Now let me explain this to you. This is only my considered opinion. That's done for a reason. It's not done for no reason. There's a reason why we have gridlock in between these particular generations. So when we talk about the idea of history in education, what have you learned thus far? Well, we learned that George Washington was a great man. How'd you know? Chopped down a cherry tree and I cannot tell a lie. He also owned over 300 slaves. He also did some very sadistic things in the idea of creating himself dentures. He used his slaves to create dentures. Third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, architect of the Declaration of Independence, had over a 40-year relationship with Sally Hemingway. They had more than 5 children. So when we talk about the founding fathers and slavery, they go hand in hand. So I ask you all a question. As an intelligent college student, is the United States Constitution a pro-slavery document? College student, not the college professors. We know exactly what you're going to say. But we can get the college professors right too. There's not one of us that's above truth in this room. The youngest one is the most important. And here's something that you should never forget, especially for you young ladies. When you teach a man, you teach an individual. You teach a lady, you teach a nation. And we'll go slow. The youngest one of you all is in this classroom, in this particular setting. And the more and more you understand the role of a woman, the more and more you are better off as a society. So when we talk about history, there was a very bright lady, her name was Maria Stewart. And Maria Stewart, she ran with David Walker. And if you've ever heard anything about David Walker's appeal, she was a bit more brazen than David Walker. And if those of you haven't, just go with me and you'll be just fine too. And she says it just like this. History informs us that we sprung from one of the most learned nations of the earth. Greece flocked thereafter. So now when we understand the idea of African education and the idea of what African education really meant in the society, especially today, when we begin to understand what's the difference between, and Dr. Conji Wilson said it well. He said there must be a clear distinguishing difference between what has been written and what those who have written said happened. So you all who are sitting in front of us as the next generation, yes, I've been so impressed with you all. But let me explain this to you. I have sat in your chair, not at this same time. But I have definitely understood where you are. So here's the had thus far, and the education that you will receive, you have to make sure that that education in itself is going to be feasible for what you do in life. Anybody have an aspiration? Tell me an aspiration, what it is that you plan to be as you go along. Anybody? An engineer. We need more engineers. A technical writer. We need more writers. Guys, I want you. We got any scientists in the house? I forgot all about that. She has been so very helpful all day. Do we have any folks in agriculture? Do we have any biologists? Well, all right. So the masses of us are studying things that we're going to go into and have to work with other people, which is good. How many of you all aspire to be teachers? Good. Okay. The idea with this is, you all, that we make sure that we prepare you for what it is that you're going to see. Now, when we say that the idea of history and the idea of what's sprung from our history, Frederick Douglas says it well. He said, people may not get all they work for in this world, but they must certainly work for all that they're going to get. So you all, as a young one, don't be illusioned by the microwave mentality of how you've been raised. Now, when we talk about being absorbed into the whole society, to be assimilated into America, to be assimilated into college, there's a process. What's the first thing you got to do as far as the process to go to Western Illinois University? Let's have somebody who's a professor. Go ahead. First thing you have to do is fill out an application, complete an application. And after that, the process starts. So what do you have to do to be a critical thinker today in society? How does that process start? Because we want you to make sure that you're a critical thinker. How do those two words as a compound term fit together when we say critical and thinking? How important is critical thinking? Well, it's critical. Don't use the same word. Critical thinking is a must. So what we mean by critical thinking is not only do you think outside of the box, because everybody has a box that they live in, but critical thinking, and there's one thing that you can always tap this back to as a critical thinker, you will always be able to research your researcher. Let me stop and go slow. When you research your researcher, three parts to this, you all. When you research your researcher, you find out exactly who forwards you any type of information. Like tonight, when you go back, you've already hit my name and Google my name, you're researching your researcher. You're going to find some things on me. I hope they're all positive, you know. But you know, things happen with the internet, don't they? I cannot believe he did that. That really looked like it. But if it's negative, it's not me, all right? But if we researching our researchers, three parts. The very first part is find exactly who's forwarding the information. Number two, find out why they will forward the information. And number three, to be wise, if you can't find number one or number two, find out who's going to profit from forward the information. And you'll find number one and number two locked in with number three. So to be a critical thinker, what you have to do is question your professors. Question the books. Question the idea of formal education. Let me go back to what it said. Formal education has a desired outcome for those in training. Socialize, you know what that term is? Socializing. Normally socialization happens between 1 and 5 years old. What happens between 1 and 5? What the kid do between 1 and 5? Go ahead. He's talking. Good. Somebody else. He's talking, so he asks a question. What else is he doing? That's a must. Walking, because if he ain't walking by one, you're going to start dragging him, right? He got to do something, right? Because he's not what? Socializing what? Correctly. So he's walking, he's talking. He begins to do what after what? He's asking questions. Is he finding out where he sits in society between 1 and 5? And then by the time 5 comes, you send him to school. Because if he's not going to go to school, then something is going wrong, correct? As socialization skills would say. So he walks through the door the first day of school, and they tell him to stand up. Look towards the flag, put your hand over your heart, and do what? No, repeat after me. Stop it right there. And then they say what? What's the first word? Now you know this. I do what? I pledge allegiance to what? To the flag. And when we begin to talk about pledging allegiance, pledge means that you're willing to die. That's what a pledge is. That's what a pledge is. So now, by the time your kid is 5 years old in kindergarten and you haven't taught them their ABCs already, they're going to teach your child to be patriotic before they're going to teach your child to be literate. The process of education and what it is a desired outcome. Now make sure we understand that. A project has at least 3 things. Anybody from Chicago? Anybody from the projects? You don't want to raise their hand. What's the name of the building? I to be well. The only one that's named after someone black. Anybody else? What building? Stateways. Anybody else? They don't want to talk about it, all right? Okay. But you get, you work that out very, very differently. But the idea of, if you understood what the idea of a project is, a project has a start date, an end date, and a design outcome. So when they created the projects in Chicago, let me be very specific about this because I don't want you guys to go wrong with this. It was created by the University of Chicago for a design outcome. University of Chicago is looked to as one of the elite schools in the country. The atom bomb was created there. Hyde Park, the area was created there. University of Chicago is now the leading study and has been the leading study on blacks for years. University of Illinois at Chicago is the leading study in the city of Chicago metropolitan area on black women. So now every time that we believe that things are just happening by coincidence or some happenstance, it's done in a design fashion for a design outcome. So when I say to you all, when we begin to talk about the idea of formal education, it wants to make folks be able to obey rules, laws, and comply. Let me explain to you. The idea of education is to have you think to the rules as the right answer, so you comply. So when you become the person who thinks outside the box, you become that critical thinker. And when we understand that critical thinkers are able to put the fingers back at themselves to scrutinize their own thoughts. Now that's kind of harsh, though. When you know you're wrong, and for whatever reason your pride gets in the way and won't allow you to move on to another thought. That's less than being a critical thinker. So the critical thinker will in himself ask questions that will remove the idea of bias, distorted, immature thoughts. And what it will provide you with is the idea of structure. And here's something that you can always do as a critical thinker. And I'll charge you all with this, if you can do me one favor. And you can do this within the next week, if you would. Anybody got a conversation that you know is coming within the next 4 or 5 days that's not going to be so pleasant? Because of who you're going to be talking to. That one phone call you dream, it's coming. You know it's coming, right? And this is what I ask you. As a critical thinker, instead of going into that particular conversation with malice and forethought or being ready to fight with that person because they're ready with you, remove the idea of bickering for one conversation. Remove the idea of quarrel for one conversation. You might have to make the conversation shorter, which is a start. But remove the idea of bickering and quarreling and use reasoning when you're talking with that person. For one conversation, and you off and running as one who's using critical thinking in your everyday life. Does everybody understand that? Something that small will start a ball rolling with you that will have you looking very critically at almost everything that you do. So when we talk about the idea of using abstract ideas, well, let's talk about Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. When he talked about formal education, and he talked about what it meant to him. Now, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, does anybody know what rank he holds as far as the idea of education when he's the very first black man to graduate Harvard University with a PhD? Everybody shake their head to that? We can agree? Now, somebody tell me number 2. Dr. Conrad Woodson. Those two should always go hand in hand, you all. Very first person to graduate Harvard University with a PhD, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. Second black man to graduate Harvard University with a PhD, Dr. Conrad Woodson. Those two go hand in hand. So when we begin to talk about the idea of what W.E.B. Du Bois thought about, the idea of the crisis of identity, this is what we talk about the young black man. He has a crisis of identity. What do we mean by a crisis of identity? Well, a crisis is a problem. And the identity, that just is, well, let's think about it like this. If we just take two of the words to abbreviate identification, we can use the words ID, correct? Now, what's on your personal ID? Somebody tell me one thing that's on your personal ID. Name, address, what else? Weight, height, what else? A picture. Your social security number. So what is it doing? It's identifying you to the tip of where and who you are. So when we have a crisis of who we are, then we're not really sure about who it is and what it is we should look to for answers. So we come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that will never explain. So let me read this for you, for Dr. Carter Jr., Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, and this is what he says. He said, here then is a dilemma, and it's a puzzling one, I must admit. What after all am I? Am I an American or am I a Negro? Can I be both? Or is it my duty to cease to be a Negro as soon as possible and be an American? And that's from Occasional Papers written in 1897. And for all of you Du Boisians in the room, I know this is early Du Bois, but it's still Du Bois. And perhaps his most famous work, classic, Souls of Black Folks. And this is him talking in 1903. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strives, two warring ideas in one dark body. He said he wishes to make it possible for man to be both Negro and American without being cursed and spit upon. That's early doings. That means that he changed along the way. Y'all got it? So he wouldn't have said this at the time, a little later. But back then it was groundbreaking how he was asking this question. So we ask you a question today. Can you be black and an American? Is it possible? It's a really quick answer. You gotta think about it just a little. You gotta think about it just a little. Think about it like Dr. W. Du Bois said. He says, and he asks this, if it does my black blood place upon me any more obligation to assert my nationality than German, Irish, or Italian blood would? Well, when you look at the situation of blacks just here in America, yes, me as one who is dedicated to the idea of uplifting the future generation, yes, it means everything to me to assert more than the next person, because we need more than the following the group that are coming before us. So, what I say to you all is I give you a directive, and this is for you students, and you educators as well. We all can follow along this. There was a command given to Prophet Muhammad, and it said, Ikra. Ikra means read. Y'all all right? Everybody look up. Y'all all right? Talk back to me. Y'all all right? Yes. Yeah. Y'all all right then, all right? Prophet Muhammad said, clearly, he was told Ikra. And it was said that Prophet Muhammad was illiterate. So how can you tell a man to read who's illiterate? Let me explain this. As far as you all, you guys are reading all the time. But when you become critical readers, that particular information becomes a bit more clear to you. So reading the idea of a comic book just won't do it. Reading the idea of just your Facebook page won't do it. You have to read. And what we mean by that is to gather relevant information. To test your own hypotheses about things that you've already been taught. Raise a vital question. Formulate a problem very clearly by reading things. But here's something that you can do. If you're going to do research, I challenge all of you to research somebody that you don't necessarily like. What do we mean by that? To be very clear, I did some research on Adolf Hitler years ago. And how many of us haven't heard about Hitler? Or how many of us have not heard the idea of what Hitler did in front of the world? That being the case, what I found out, and this is what will happen to you all, it's easy to research somebody that you like. What you'll do is you'll make them look good. If you were reading Dr. King, if you were talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, and that was your research, and you wanted to make Dr. Martin Luther King look good, you would not speak of his extramarital affairs. But if you were talking about Hitler, what I found out about Hitler is Hitler understood the importance of science. He also had an idea of running the world. No one ever can condone what Mr. Hitler did in front of the world. So I don't want you guys to challenge that. I'm using it as an example to say, I never thought that I had anything in common with this particular man. He also had the coolest Mercedes Benz that you ever saw in your life. 2 doors with an AMG engine in 1940. And he had all kind of guns on the side, he could shoot and get away. It was a real superhero car. So we had more than one thing in common. But what we ask you all to do is make sure that you research outside the box. That is about being critical here. So the idea is to find real understanding. And what we mean by real understanding is, don't even worry about the idea of reading too much. Has anybody in your group ever said, you ever heard that term? I think I read a little too much. Not much. How about I listen to a little bit of radio? I do too much TV. I'm always on the computer. Ignorant. Read for future generations. Read to allow them to see you read. Does anybody understand what I mean by that? Set the bar high by you doing the example of reading. Now, what we talk about is, I want to kind of go directly to the idea of what we call mental side. Bobby Wright, Dr. Bobby Wright, who was the very first black man to graduate from the University of Chicago with a PhD in psychology. He says menticide is tied into something close to suicide or homicide. And what he said specifically was it was a form of insanity that has left the black community brain dead, where we have, for the most part, become zombies. And our mental thinking has been reversed. And he says, for the most part, we come to see our enemy as having a preponderance of a friendship, while we see our friendship having a preponderance with our enemies. So when we understand the idea of being critical thinkers, we understand exactly what he was saying. When he said the idea to kill one's mental process, to kill one's natural thought process and inject an alien process within it. So when we understand that someone that is an agent, they represent someone else. So education is indeed an agent. It's an agent of socialization. So why don't we see as many black men in college nowadays? Well, you black men who are here today understand exactly why. They don't feel like it's important. They don't feel like learning a formal education. Well, even some of them will tell you flat out, if I go to college, I'm going to end up being white. I'm going to learn things that have nothing to do with me, so you can understand the idea of not having a connection. We call that la-la land. Now, la-la land is a place where they say over 80% of black folks reside. We mean things that we see on TV. We mean things that, for the most part, are totally opposite for our well-being. So when we talk about the idea of menticide, we talk about the idea of la-la land. We talk about the idea of one's own mind being replaced by a group of people for a reason. Go back to what we said, the design outcome. What is the design outcome in formal education? The design outcome in formal education is to have you sit in a seat of superiority. What does education do? Education in itself enlightens you. But what have you learned about yourself during that enlightenment? The enlightenment that you see and that you must take back to your homes. And this is what you charge with. You charge with the idea of being better than our generation. And we should do everything to get you there. You're also charged with the idea of those who are coming up above. And what we mean by that is the education that you have has to be able to reach those who are now voiceless. Do you all understand what we mean by that? If the education that you get here has nothing to take back to your particular part of the world, and it can't help that alcohol, it can't help the dope fiend, it can't help the thief, it can't help the crackhead. Do you understand that that is the group, the youngest is the most important? That's where you're going to find the person who has the cure for AIDS, the person who will cure cancer comes from those kind of areas. You understand what we mean? Out of our most painful struggles comes our most brilliant creative genius. So we know for a fact that when it comes to the idea of what happens in our communities where we're from, what happens most is the most talented of us leave and never come back. So So all of this you're charged with. Furthermore, you're charged with the idea of making the idea of what you're doing here now historical. What can you do to make this historical? These young men and these young ladies who put on a Black Summit, that was unbelievable. I saw all of you come together. That in itself is historical. You have to understand it. And I'm going to keep saying it so that you do understand it. Did everybody get a handout today that said, "Dear Black America"? I want all of you all at your own convenience get a chance to read through that. And the idea is that you read through it without the mindset of humor. And you'll get the most out of it. Now, I can never thank you all enough for spending this small time that we've been together. I'll be more than happy to answer any question. But as I close, you all, Black History Month in itself definitely needs a makeover. And you are the architects of that makeover. You are the architects of the future. Please make sure that you understand that minor middle class rewards will only be minor middle class rewards. And it will be something new that will come out that you'll want. So do not say your morality nor your thought pattern for an idea of some sort of car, a house, or something that somebody can take away. Because I guarantee you, if morality is versus the idea of some kind of material culture, the same material culture that you claim, that you long for, will be the one thing that you want to get away from as fast as you possibly can. So I thank each and every one of you all for taking time tonight, and I wish you all the best in your studies. Please, éclate, and do it for a specific learning purpose. Éclate for those who are coming behind you. Éclate for critical thinking. Éclate. Make sure that you understand the importance of researching your research. And make sure, and I have to say this, I have to charge you all, as you organize, make sure that you understand that for us to be able to organize in a proper manner, and this is very important, you have to be able to take orders from people that you think that you are smart at. Let me go slow. You have to take orders from people that you think that you're smart at. That happens all the time. So I thank you all. Peace and blessings. Stand up and tell me your name and give me the question. Hotel is, if I'm not, the idea of that comes from ancient times when we would greet ourselves. That even outdates some of the more historically religious terms like you hear Shalom Alaikum, Salam Alaikum. That was prior to the idea. That was ancient. Somebody else, please give me a question, you all. Don't leave out here like we ain't got no questions. Go ahead, brother. I don't know how much more we're going to be able to launch. And I don't know how much more we're going to be able to ask for. Sitting on our feet, sitting on our hands and bowing, and doing things that we should be doing for ourselves. So I think that you asked an excellent question. And I think that you all hold the key to the idea of what the next generation is going to look to for their form of freedom. First of all, we got to understand what freedom and justice looks like. 9 times out of 10, when we talk about freedom and justice, we talk about our ability to be able to buy things that we don't necessarily need at any given time. Go ahead, brother.
Think about it, like previous generations, they went through everything that they went through so that we could benefit certain things. So they're putting in work for generations to come. Generations to come, that you know, hopes of them, let's say, keeping the culture. But like, since we are the generation that's going to raise, sort of, like, set that example for the next generation, how do you, like, what would you say that we should take as a first step? Because you see like how violent Chicago is. And these are all children that's like younger than everybody in here. These are little kids that are like 17, 16. You know, they have kids, their parents are teen parents. So how can we communicate with them? Because they don't know, because they don't know their parents. So So it's like you have two different like groups. You know, the people that are trying to change and the people that don't know. And they're happy. You know, those are the people that's caught out in this area.
That's a A+ question. Now, to answer, what normally happens, or what has always happened, is that we have respect for our elders. And whatever the elder said, we have kind of agreed with, because we knew that those steps came from steps that sacrifice was involved. Now let's go with Dr. College Wilson taught us to see the trouble. In the early 80s, our elders, as well as everybody else, got their hands on narcotics. So now you have a little less respect for your uncle because he has an issue that you know completely about. And then we have, over the last 50 years, the morality of our family structure has been deteriorating so very quickly. So now the steadfast person in that whole particular relationship was always Big Mama. And Big Mama made the last call, and Big Papa had to go along with it, right? Because it made a whole lot of sense. But Big Mama's now 40 years old, and she wants to go to the club with her daughter. So a lot of these things that have been erased are morally and ethically unreplaceable. And the part that we see is the lack of continuity within generations, even within the idea of, let's just say, college students. There has to be a continuity between when you leave this campus and when you go back to where you're from. Because if the idea of you coming home leaves everybody else feeling like you're being a bit more guarded, or you have come home with arrogance. So you have to realize when you hear those things, that's coming from a group that didn't go to college. So there has to be some breakdown conversations. You have to realize a lot of these people that we are dealing with now have been taught absolutely wrong things in a long time. And they have become fancy or powerful cause. So now we're looking at a breakdown in structure. We're looking at the idea of what did work, we are now rejecting. Furthermore, there's no sacrifice. So the equation in itself, it lacks rhyme, reason, and continuity. And it leaves us in a position where somehow, some way, you can look to people who look just like you and see an enemy and not see a friend. That's what Bobby G. Wright called menticide. You replace your thoughts with someone else's thoughts.
In my situation, you know, a lot of us are like the first generation college, right? So it's not just a community, but it can be in a home. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So like when I go home, my own mom is saying, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, oh, you need to get your master's degree, you need to work, you know what I'm saying? And so basically how do we, not having that background and that support ourselves, go on to build that support for our own family and children and stuff like that.
I think since I met you, you've already proven to me how you break the chains and how you are moving along. Me and the sister just started talking. She talked about how hard she was. And then she began to talk about what she was majoring in. So I'm sitting alone. She's majoring in chemistry, and she's working this, that, and the other. You are already breaking the cycle. And your son sees that. Now, he also hears what your grandmother said. So I think the worst thing that you can do is not address it. The worst thing you can do, but you have to address it very delicately. Because this is a mother-daughter relationship. And if you really want to get down to some of the issues that our young ladies have, that's the relationship that has to be dealt with. So I say, you have to be a little bit calm and understand, be a little bit more focused that your mother doesn't understand. And not only does she not understand, she's a tad bit upset that it didn't go that way for her. I know I can get one more question. All right. You feel it? What's your name, brother? He's Willie.
Okay, so basically my question is, last day we made another question, saying we have to be willing to take orders from someone that's smarter than you. So let's say in and of itself, would you say that this generation has to be
And that's every generation. You hit it right in the middle, young man. That was not a question. You just told me the answer as you formed the statement. Excellent. That's excellent right in the middle. But I need to make sure, and I think that you have it clear, if I can give any clarity to it, it's a consistent sacrifice. And what I mean by sacrifice, you all, sacrifice is something in this particular thought where you're going to sacrifice something that's very dear to you to somebody you'll never meet. And I was taught to make sure that you do it with a really good attitude because you get something back eventually, but you can't live for it back. But the idea has totally always been for future generations. That's what drives me when I'm on my way down there, just to see you all. I understand that there's hope. Because there's a group of people who are counting on you all to leave here and come home with answers. You guys understand that? I know that's a lot to be on your plate. But I'm being as accurate and as candid as I possibly can. Because every time you spend this much time to get yourself attuned, to make other folks attuned, and you remove yourself from that particular equation, and no one really feels that for it. Not the same way that you